Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you a Forbidden Rites Totem Hierophant guide. This is going to cover a 3 Exalt level of investment that gets to around 8 million Sirus DPS, which I think is kind of appropriate since a lot of the more casual players that are messaging me talking about their struggles have a very limited amount of money, and no matter what you're playing currently, you can probably sell off a lot of your gear and a lot of the things you own at the moment and scrounge together 3x for a reroll. You can invest much larger amounts of money into this build, and I'm going to provide the PoBs in the description of the video below. It can scale all the way up to a multi-mirror level of investment where we're getting about 90 million DPS, but of course that's not going to really interest most of you guys, so we're just going to cover the sort of budget stuff, and I think I'm going to get right into it. So I've put together a level 90 tree, and I'm just going to explain exactly what we're doing and how we're deriving our power from this build. So to start off with Ascendancy, you want Divine Guidance, Conviction of Power, and then Ritual of Awakening. That's pretty straightforward, and it's what we run on most Totem builds. In order to deal with your curse effectiveness, you're going to be running Asylum up here, which is giving you 20% reduced curse effect. Sanctum of Thought, which is giving you another 20% reduced effect of curses, and then you're going to be running the upgraded Soul of Yugal Pantheon, which gives another 20%. This totals 60%, and then you're going to run a single Kikazara for the other 40%. This is going to reduce the effect of curses on you by 100%, which basically turns the soul-mounted self-cursing aspect into a buff with the Self-Flagellation Jewel, which is giving you increased damage per curse on you, although you're not actually being affected by the curses. As for the rest of the build, we're pretty much just coming out through here. We do like the standard sort of a lighter divinity path. We take Holy Dominion predominantly because we're going to struggle to get our res cap for this build. The items I use could certainly have a lot more resistance on them, and if you manage to fix up your resist without the Holy Dominion notable, then feel free to take other stuff. But the thing is that this is only costing us 1 point for 12% all res, which is kind of, it's overvalued, right? It's worth getting. So we come up here, we get Mind Over Matter, we get these life and mana regen nodes. We come down here and we get Clear Mind, although you could put other stuff in there if you want. We come up, we get Mental Rapidity, we work our way to a Cluster Jewel. Now, the important thing to know about the Cluster Jewel is all we really need is a single Ancestral Preservation. The higher investment versions of the PoB are going to have other things that are important here, and you can look at that at your own leisure. However, the most important thing for us is Ancestral Preservation. What this notable does is it means that instead of your totems getting 6 attacks off before they die, they're now going to get 12 attacks off before they die. If you're able to do a large Cluster Jewel with 2 Ancestral Preservations, they're going to be able to get off, I believe, between 18 and 19 attacks before they die, due to the extra chaos resistance. In addition, it's also scaling Totem Life, which scales our DPS, which is really important. So from there, we come down, we get Arcane Potency, of course, we get the life nodes, we get Arcane Capacitor. This isn't really major, but since we're scaling mana with Mind Over Matter, it's kind of good to just have a larger mana pool, and it's also giving us a little bit of damage. We come up here for Ancestral Bond. We pay through the Totem Life node rather than the Totem Placement Speed, as this node then gives us damage since we are scaling our life. And to give you a idea of what it's worth, like the Arcane Potency node here is about 7% DPS, and this minor node here is 4. Whereas if you compare the minor nodes for this, you're getting 1.6, 1.8. This is 4.1% DPS as a minor node, which makes it very high value. We come down, we're going to get Rain of Splinters. I'm going to talk about this more when we cover the gem stuff, but trust me, it's really worth taking Rain of Splinters. We go Devotion, then we loop back up here. We're taking Shaman's Dominion. We're going for Cruel Preparation, Deep Thoughts. We get the jewel slot here for our self-flag. We come down for Annihilation, Arcanist Dominion. We come across the Heart and Soul part, where we're getting life and mana. This is very important since we're a Mind Over Matter build. Come up here for Arcane Will. This is just sort of a nice defensive node. Then we come across, we're getting Nimbleness, we're getting Threat Seeker, and then you're just going to put a jewel that has double crit multi or crit multi and totem life, or whatever combination of things you want on a jewel. You're going to put that in there. And then we're probably going to take the Dex nodes. Doing that allows you to get whatever amulet is worthwhile for you, but if you do have a Jade amulet, you can probably drop one of these Dex nodes. This Dex node and this are kind of like variables. You can take them whether you want, you don't have to, and then there are other things you can sort of invest the points in. Maybe you want to get better cluster jewels, that sort of thing. And then the last thing we really take is Prodigal Perfection. It's a nice damage node, I guess, and it's also giving us max mana. So that's the PoB. I'm not going to show the higher investment PoBs in this video, but you can just open those PoBs and see for yourself. They're pretty drastically different, but it basically comes down to dropping points here and going for a full cluster setup here, and eventually getting a second large and 2 medium cluster jewel setup down here, whilst dropping the curse effect nodes, because we're going to be running Rites. Okay, so our gear is pretty straightforward. We basically just want to start off with cheap wands. It's important to know that we don't actually want +1 level on our wands, although it is beneficial to have +1 levels. It doesn't scale as well with our build as it does with other builds. It's a much lower multiplier, and the thing is, if you start getting wands that have +1 levels on them, then you're going to be paying absurd and obscene amounts of money for the wands. What you really want to look for is increased spell damage, increased cast speed, crit chance for spells, and crit strike multiplier. These 4 stats are going to give you much more mileage on your wands, and they tend to be really common stats on wands, so you can buy them quite cheap. I ended up getting my wands for about a total of 75C all up, and these are pretty big. I've included a link in this spreadsheet, which you can get from the video description, that's going to take you to some ones that aren't quite as good as this, but they're almost as good as this, and they're going to cost you about 10 to 15C each, these ones. There were some that were like almost as good as this for like 7C. And yeah, I would highly recommend doing these. It's very, very fortunate for us that we scale so unconventionally and we can just use these 4 multipliers rather than needing levels, because it allows us to save a lot of money on weapons that other builds don't get to do. Moving on from that, I have links here for Rain of Splinters. Rain of Splinters is the jewel that I showed you that adds 2 extra projectiles. Clear Mind is another jewel that adds damage and mana regen so long as we don't have any mana reserved, which we don't. You want a 5-link Soul Mantle. This is going to put you back 25C, not a big deal. If you have the money, you can go for 6-link Soul Mantle, of course, but, this is a budget guide, so I'm building the character around the assumption you don't have a lot of money, and the clips you're going to see at the end of the video are going to show a lower investment character, pretty much set up like, oh, actually, it is the character with this setup. Torch Oak Step. So, these are boots that scale up our totem life, and they give us a decent amount of movement speed and totem placement speed, which is a really nice utility. Having this much totem life is just effectively giving us 20% more damage. It's very rare that in this game that you can get boots that give you extra damage, and so this is really big. This is actually quite huge. The skill's already overtuned, and then we just randomly get 20% more damage from our boots. Why not? Why not, right? And it's only going to cost you 1C. That's the greatest part. Essence Worm, 4C ring. It's going to allow you to put Zealotry in without reserving mana. Very important for a mind over matter build. It's just an extra more damage multiplier, which, you can't complain about. The Cluster Jewel with Ancestral Preservation, the thing that allows your totems to live through the self-damage, is going to cost you 60C. It's the most important and the most expensive item in this entire build, but, as you can see here, there aren't that many expensive items in this build, and this is the most expensive one, so you shell out for this one thing, and then you're good to go. I'm assuming that you're going to have room for 2 double crit multi-jewels in this build. I've provided a link. They're going to cost about 10C each, although if you are fast, you can get them. There are a few up there for like 3 and 5C. So that's just going to come down to when you're watching this video. Kikazaru is a 1C ring. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It's the thing that helps us reduce the effect of our curses. And then our Amulet, Gloves, and Helmet are just life and res Amulet, Gloves, and Helmets. I've put trade links in here to filter out for mana as well as life and resistance, but this is up to you. If you see something that you like that's a little cheaper, you can buy them. Now, the reason we don't run more important things here is because these are the best slots to just... they're the weakest slots, basically. While we can get things that give us damage, so we can get Culling Strike here, we can get Unnerve on our gloves, we can put in Viridi's Veil, and we can get, +1 and int scaling amulets. The problem is that a lot of these upgrades for these slots are very expensive, and they start to make it obscenely hard to fit in our resistances and whatnot. So these are just really efficient slots where you can pay a few Chaos Orbs. I've budgeted for 5, you can easily get them for 1, where you're going to have some life, some mana, and all the resistances to hit your res cap. And that's really all you're looking to get out of these 3 slots. If you're interested in getting better items, you can go to the higher investment PoBs that are also going to be in the description of the video. For our anointment, we want Primal Manifestation. So Primal Manifestation is the totem node that gives us totem damage, totem life, and totem duration. The totem life doubles as extra damage, so it works out to about 11% more damage. It's pretty big for us. No reason not to get it. It's just the strongest anointment, and it's insanely cheap. It's going to cost you 4C to get this anointment. And finally, Arn's Anguish. This is a belt that's going to cost you about 25C. And it basically just converts the endurance charges that we get passively into brutal charges. This belt gives us 24% more damage, it gives us 50 fire res, it gives us 12% max life. It's very nice. It's very nice and very cheap, right? And this is pretty much just the build. Of course, if you have more money, I really do suggest going through the other PoBs and scouting out sort of the upgrades that you can fit in, but this exact setup is going to get you 8 million DPS on Sirus. And that's not 8 million PoB DPS where, you know, like some projectiles aren't hitting. I have not inflated that number. If I wanted to inflate the number, I would have added greater volley into the builds, and I'll just show you what that looks like, right? So if we go to here and we replace this with greater volley, look, we've added almost 1 million extra DPS in. I'm not interested in inflating these numbers or misrepresenting the real DPS this build's going to do. You're going to summon 4 totems, they're each going to get 12 hits before dying, and you know, you can resummon them in a very, very, very small amount of time. Totem placement time is 0.21 seconds, which means to resummon all your totems only takes you 0.8 of a second. It's really, really fast, and this is with the budget PoB. When you go higher investment, you can get this number down further. You know, you can get to the point where you're basically summoning all 4 totems in half a second, so there's very little delay, and when I say 8 million serious DPS, that's what you're getting. I'm going to leave gameplay footage at the end of this video, which you can sort of look through at your own pace. The gameplay footage shows this PoB with the character that has all the gear included in here. I've, you know, unequipped all my big upgrades. I'm using a 5-link. Everything that you see here that's achievable in 3x DPS, that's the footage. At the very end, there's going to be a Sirus skill that shows a higher investment version of the build. So I have a 3x budget Sirus kill on Awakener 8, and then immediately after I have a higher investment Sirus 8 that they're both deathless kills, but the higher investment one obviously does it a little bit faster because it has a lot more DPS, although that one was not as optimized. But anyway, we're going to get into the rest of the guide, and then you can look at that later on. Okay, so the thing with gems is that I have to explain kind of how projectiles work so that you understand exactly what's going on and why we're picking certain gems. The way projectiles work with Forbidden Rites is that it fires out one baseline projectile, but then it can fire up to 7 extra projectiles based on how many enemies are around. So if you are surrounded by 7 enemies, it's going to fire out 8 projectiles. Now this is great while you're clearing maps, but when you get to a boss, that means you're back to 1 projectile, which is kind of a problem, especially on a skill that can shotgun its projectiles. What I mean by shotgunning is that all the projectiles can each individually hit the same target on the same cast of the spell. Most projectile skills do not work this way. Freezing Pulse, for example, I know with Frost Snow you can gain extra projectiles, but those projectiles don't actually deal additional damage. The extra projectiles are there to give the skill effectively bigger AoE. That's how most projectile skills work. So the best way to actually scale the projectile count is with volley support and rain of splinters. That sounds like a very unconventional setup, and I'm going to use a image to sort of show you exactly what's going on and how this happens. So this is a little diagram that shows you the projectile firing points, and basically when you have a single projectile and you only have a boss, your totem is going to fire that 1 projectile directly at the boss. The next 4 projectiles, in addition to that first, are going to fire at points around that middle spot, right? And this is the first blue ring that indicates those other projectile spots, or landing points rather. And that means that up to 5 projectiles are always going to hit the boss. If you have any number between 1 and 5, most of the time they're going to hit a boss. And I tested this by getting a friend and doing some PvP, and we tested varying amounts of projectile counts and seeing, you know, going through a video recording and seeing how many projectiles actually hit the target. So what we found was as we added more projectiles beyond the 5th, they stopped hitting that target, because then they started moving to this outer ring of landing points where they were trying to hit things that were not that singular target, right? So maybe on much larger bosses, you might end up getting extra mileage out of extra projectiles because the boss will fit into the second ring, but it's more likely than not you're just going to want to run 5 projectiles. And now here's the thing, right? We have multiple ways of getting 5 projectiles. I know a lot of people, including myself, probably thought that, you know, greater greater multiple projectiles or greater volley were the way to do so, but it actually turns out it's not. So what we want to do is run volley, support, and simply just our rain of splinters here. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us access to 5 projectiles with the smallest amount of damage penalties, right? When you're running volley support, you're getting 5% less projectile or 3% less projectile damage at level 20, whereas if you were to compare it to a GMP, right, you're getting 26% less projectile damage for having those extra projectiles. And the Rain of Splinters provides a 30 to 50% reduction in totem damage. However, that reduction is additive with sources of increased damage. So if you have 200% increased damage but 50% reduced damage, that still means you have 150% increased damage, whereas the less multipliers on this are multiplicative, and they are their own multipliers, which means they're very devastating when you get these in high amounts. So, what our gem setup ends up being is basically we're going to run Forbidden Rites with increased crit strike supports, increased crit damage support, volley support, and void manipulation support. If you don't have enough money to go for an awakened void manipulation support, you can go for anomalous. And what that's going to do is increase the area of effect. It's going to make it a little easier for your projectiles to hit multiple targets while you're clearing, but it's not very important. If you can't afford it, don't worry about it. Just get a simple void manipulation support and be done with it. Now, as for a 6th gem, we have 3 options, and I'm going to talk about them individually so you understand the difference. So first off is cruelty support. You want cruelty support if you just want the highest raw amount of boss damage, and that's it. Nothing else to say there. It doesn't really do anything else. It's just more damage. On the other end of the spectrum is faster projectile support. That's going to make your projectiles come out much faster, but it has a much lower amount of damage, so it's like the weakest out of these 3. But you may value the faster projectile speed. It's going to provide you a lot of safety while you're clearing maps, that sort of thing. And, if that's something that's very important to you, it's important to know that it's an option that you can take, and I would recommend really trying it and seeing how you feel with it. This build has more than enough damage, so if you feel like you can drop the 6th gem for extra projectile speed, that's something worth doing. A lot of other builds use this support gem, like Aura Stackers with Spark. It's a very common one that uses this gem because without it, they will die more frequently. And then the sort of in-betweens, the one I like personally is faster casting support. It has almost as much raw damage as cruelty support, but it does have the benefit, similar benefit to what faster projectile support has, where rather than the projectiles traveling faster, they're coming out faster and more frequently. So enemies are being hit sooner and more often, right? Which is very important if you're trying to clear a map. Things need to die fast before they get to you. So those are the 3 options, and it's really just up to you. I really recommend trying them out and seeing how you feel with each one. I have tried them all extensively, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep using faster casting support. It just feels the best overall to me, but I could see myself eventually using faster projectile support once I invest further into the build. Now, as for our utilities, we're just going to run Valrighteous Fire with increased duration support and Assassin's Mark. Divergent Assassin's Mark is better than base Assassin's Mark, but that's up to you. It's decently cheap, it's not very expensive, so you can just sort of figure this one out for yourself, depending on your needs and your budget. The next one is Wither Totems, so we want to run Wither with Spell Totem support, multiple Totem support, and increased duration. I could give you a long-winded explanation about why this is ideal, but basically, if you run these 4 gems in combination with each other, your Wither is going to easily stack up to 15 times, and you're going to get the largest damage multiplier out of this. It's very important to do it this way. This next utility setup is kind of optional. You don't have to run it the way I'm running it if you don't want. It's very flexible, but what I'm running at the moment is Cast 1 Damage Taken, Phase Run, and Immortal Core. And the reason why is because sometimes you run up to a pack of mobs and your totems don't kill those mobs straight away, and you get Phase Run procced, and that means you're going to have a brief period of phasing, so you're not caught on the enemies, and also Immortal Core is going to give you a bit of damage reduction. Very important. This is this doesn't make you immortal, but there are so many times where I would die if I didn't have this set up, and there were so many times I was dying far more often before I had this set up. Next up is Arcane Surge and Flame Dash. Nothing difficult to explain here. It's just you get a damage buff and mana regen whenever you Flame Dash. You want your Arcane Surge level 1, obviously, or I think you can get up to level 3 before it stops working, but just keep it level 1 to be safe if you don't know what you're doing. Cast on Death with Portal, of course. We run this in all our builds. If you're not playing softcore with Cast on Death Portal, you're either trolling yourself by wasting your own time, or you're playing a very tanky build that belongs in hardcore that is not optimized for softcore progression. Alright, so Cast on Death Portal, just do it. Thank me later. Finally, we have Stormbrand with increased duration, culling strike, and then life tap support. So the reason I prefer putting life tap support on here is because life tap support actually gives you the life tap buff, which increases your flask recovery, basically. So like you're getting more life back when you use a seething flask, which is kind of a minor important thing to me, but I'm not really sold on it. It's not that important. I would happily swap it out for some other support gem if I felt there was anything worthwhile, but the gist of it is basically when a boss is about to die, you chuck a Stormbrand on it, and then the boss gets culled, and that's kind of like 11% more DPS effectively for you, so it's pretty simple. You're only going to use it on bosses, and only, I think, big bosses like Conquerors and Sirus and stuff. You probably wouldn't be using it on map bosses, because, it's much of a muchness to be pressing all these extra buttons for slight amounts of increased damage. So I just kind of wanted to show this for the fun of it. this is not a level of investment into the build that is realistic, and it's not something I'm going to recommend anyone to go for. However, when I put up the video yesterday saying this was one of the most OP skills ever made, a lot of people wrote back to me saying that actually the reason it wasn't OP and that I was wrong was because due to scaling Totem Life, it meant that this build could only get to 30 million DPS. Now, it took me all of about 2 seconds of thinking about this to realize this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and the people saying this have no idea what they're talking about, and they're just regurgitating garbage that comes from someone else who doesn't know what they're talking about. Scaling Totem Life is simply meaning that the skill is getting a ridiculous amount of additional base damage, right? It doesn't mean that there's a cap to it, because if you use this logic, you can say that any build that's scaling crit has a really low cap because you're going to eventually hit 100% crit chance. The bottom line is you can just keep stacking all the multipliers available to you in the game, and Totem Life giving you such high base damage means all your other multipliers are going to give you extra mileage. There aren't many builds that can reach 91 million DPS when fully min-maxed, and 91 million DPS is way overkill, right? It's not something you're ever going to want or need to achieve. This is enough DPS to literally kill Sirus in about a second. 1.1 seconds, Sirus on Awakener 8 is going to be dead. You don't need it. But I'm going to show you what it entails anyway, for the fun of it, for anyone who's interested. We're basically running Mirror Tier Profane Wands. We're running a Verity's Veil with an Assassin's Mark Curse Effect enchant, since that is the best enchant, surprisingly. This may surprise some people. Certainly surprised me. We're running a +4 Soul Mantle. Of course, that's going to be very expensive. A Culling Strike and a Nerve set of gloves with Tier 1 Cold Res, and then crafted Fire and Lightning. We have a Torture Step, nothing special going on here. This is literally still a 1 city unique, and you're not going to get anything better from the boot slot. You're going to run a +1 gem with a damage per 15 int, Awaken a Slammed amulet, and then you're going to put some resistance on it and scale up the resistance through catalysts so that you can still hit your res cap. And your anoint's still going to be Primal Manifestation, Essence Worm, 2 Stone Ring, etc. Coward's Legacy. You're going to have a double Zealotry Watcher's Eye where you're getting crit chance and cast speed. You're going to then run these large cluster jewels that are Dark Ideation, Unholy Grace, Touch of Cruelty, and mediums that have Ancestral Echo, Preservation, Sleeper's Sentries, Ancestral Echo, Preservation, Echo, and then you're going to run a projectile one that goes Repeater and Shrieking Bolts for the Taunt utility, since this is pretty much the exact same DPS as another one of those Totem ones, but this gives you the Totem Taunting, which is going to reduce the damage you take. It's got a decent amount of EHP. It's running about 5.6k total EHP here, which isn't bad. It's not bad. You're going to survive a Sirus Tunnel Meteor, you're going to survive a Sirus Basic Attack, you're not going to survive a Dive Beam, but then again, you shouldn't be getting hit by Dive Beams. We're using a bunch of double crit multi Totem Life jewels, which, are kind of insane and very rare, but it is what it is. And yeah, the rest of the tree is kind of pretty standard, pretty much what you would expect. Pain Attunement for the Coward's Legacy. We're still running Holy Dominion since we're only just scraping by on our fire res. And yeah, that's the build, and that's how you would hit 90 million DPS hypothetically. So there you have it, that's the build guide. Feel free to come join me on stream in a few hours. I'm going to be streaming every day as usual, 7 days a week, back to my old schedule. And if you're having any trouble or you need any help, you can ask me on stream. I'm going to be doing PoB reviews starting tonight. So you can just come bring me your build, and we'll open it up on stream, and we'll go through it, and we'll start talking about how it needs to be improved, what your upgrade paths are, all that sort of thing. You don't need to be a sub, you don't need to stick around afterwards. I just do it because I like helping people. And part of why I'm releasing this guide is because a lot of people are struggling right now, and a lot of people being faced with the prospect of potentially just quitting the game because they're not making the progress that they feel they should for the amount of time they're investing. And this build is going to help you progress through the game without having to overinvest a ridiculous amount of time compared to what you're used to doing, right? So I just want to help you guys. I want you guys to, beat Sirus, beat Maven, get rich, all that sort of stuff. It makes the game far more enjoyable when you're actually able to play it. And if you've been to my stream in the last week, you know that I'm actually very unhappy with GGG for the way they're treating casual players. I think that they don't value the amount of time casual players are putting into the game, and they don't value, their money at all, which shouldn't be the be-all, end-all of game design. However, the bottom line is casual players aren't having fun, and that really breaks my heart. So, I hope this guide helps you have a bit more fun with the game. I would love to help you if you're having any troubles at all with it, so just please come join me on stream and ask for help. This spreadsheet's going to be in the description. I know I've already said it, but basically, this spreadsheet has all the trade links for all your gear so that you don't have to spend, 20 minutes trying to look up all these items. Just paste these links into a browser, and then you're going to have the item looked up already for you. These rare items are already pre-filtered. You can change the filters depending on your needs. And then you have the PoB link here, although the PoB is going to be in the description below. If you like this video, hit me up with a like, comment, or subscribe. And otherwise, I'll probably see you guys on stream, or I'll see you guys in the next one.
warrant all this suffering. The others found strength in their projectiles. They protect their lives.
I run! What's the point? Glorious flames! Rain of stars! Creation itself! Why resist?
Life really interesting enough to warrant all this